Abu Tayyeb Al Mutanabbi was an Arab poet who used his words and his actions to fight against injustice and tyranny. Al Mutanabbi was born into a poor family in the city of Kufa in the Abbasid Empire. He was born in the year 1915 during the breakup of the Abbasid Caliphate. This was a time of political and economic instability and was a period when the Islamic world was ruled by various small empires and emirates. The Islamic Golden Age was long gone, and now the Muslim world was weak, divided, and exposed to Byzantine invasions. Al-Mutanabbi started writing poetry when he was young. During his youth, Al-Mutanabbi began to criticize the rulers in his poetry. He spoke out against the corruption and despotism of the Abbasid governors and the huge gap between the rich aristocracy and the impoverished people. He stated the following: "He who spends all his hours gathering wealth out of fear of poverty, this in itself is indeed poverty." Al-Mutanabbi's poems provoked and insulted the ruling class of the Abbasid Empire. It was not long before Al-Mutanabbi was warned by his friends that he should stick to praising princes and kings like most poets at the time. However, Al-Mutanabbi ignored this advice and carried on writing provocative poetry. Because of threats from the Abbasid government, Al-Mutanabbi fled to the Syrian desert. Al-Mutanabbi spent many years in the desert, living amongst the Bedouins. Because of his eloquence and charisma, he made a name for himself and gained many followers in the desert. Al-Mutanabbi was able to gain the support of many Arab tribes, and he was able to inspire the Bedouins to rebel against the Abbasid Caliphate. Al-Mutanabbi led the tribes of the Samawa region of the Syrian desert in a series of raids against the Abbasid military. However, eventually this rebellion was suppressed and he was arrested and imprisoned when he was only 19 years old. Al-Mutanabbi spent 2 years in prison, and in these 2 years, Al-Mutanabbi continued to write poetry. After his release from prison, Al-Mutanabbi migrated to the city of Aleppo in order to flee the oppression of the Abbasid government. During his stay in Aleppo, Al-Mutanabbi met the ruler known as Saif ad-Dawla al-Hamdani. Al-Mutanabbi became a poet in the court of Saif ad-Dawla and accompanied him in his wars against the invading Byzantine Empire. Al-Mutanabbi praised Saif ad-Dawla for defending the Islamic world against the Byzantine invasions. Al-Mutanabbi also wrote poetry for Saif ad-Dawla in order to motivate him and his army to fight the Byzantines. However, eventually the relationship between Al-Mutanabbi and Saif ad-Dawla began to worsen. Al-Mutanabbi became disillusioned with the government of Saif ad-Dawla and began to criticize the government for its corruption. Therefore, Al-Mutanabbi was exiled to Egypt. Al-Mutanabbi never compromised his principles for the sake of money. He stated the following: "I maintain my tolerance when it is an act of generosity, but I leave it if it becomes an act of cowardice. I do not take money with humiliation, and I do not like anything that taints my honor." Al Mutanabbi continued his revolutionary activities during his time in Egypt. Despite being exiled and imprisoned twice in his life, Al Mutanabbi continued to speak out against corruption, crimes, and injustice. Upon entering Egypt, Al Mutanabbi noticed that the political situation in Egypt was just as bad as it was in Syria. During this period, Egypt was ruled by a king known as Abu Misk al-Kafur. Abu Misk al-Kafur was an arrogant ruler who built huge palaces for himself while the people of Egypt starved. Initially, Al-Mutanabbi was invited by the king to work in his court. However, after witnessing the arrogance and extravagance of Al-Kafur, Al-Mutanabbi left his court and began writing poems in which he mocked and criticized Abu Misk al-Kafur. He stated the following: "The guardians of Egypt neglected the foxes of Egypt until they ate their fill from the endless wealth of Egypt. It was not long before Al-Mutanabbi became an enemy of the state. Abu Misk al-Kafur sent soldiers to search for Al-Mutanabbi. Therefore, Al-Mutanabbi fled Egypt and went back to Iraq. When Al-Mutanabbi returned to his birthplace of Kufa, the situation was terrible, as there was no central authority and the city had been plagued by crime and bandits. Therefore, Al-Mutanabbi joined forces with the people of Kufa and helped them defend the city against bandits and criminals. Al-Mutanabbi took part in a battle in which the raiding bandits were defeated and forced to flee the city. Because of his bravery and fighting off the bandits, Al-Mutanabbi was generously rewarded by the rulers of Kufa. Al-Mutanabbi's reputation as a great poet and warrior was now well established. News of his great character reached as far as Persia. Al-Mutanabbi spent the next few years of his life writing poetry in the courts of various different cities such as Shiraz and Baghdad. However, Al-Mutanabbi was suddenly killed when he was attacked near Baghdad by a gang of bandits. The leader of these bandits was a criminal that Al-Mutanabbi had mocked in one of his poems. Al-Mutanabbi was not just a poet, but also a warrior and a revolutionary who fought for the rights of others. He was a poet that was not afraid to speak out against anyone, which is why he had many enemies. Al-Mutanabbi addresses this reality in one of his poems. "My enemies wish for my death. They are like sailors who wish for something, but the wind often flows in ways other than what they desire.